Yeah, so today I'm going to speak to you about building a cloud app with Atlassian Connect, basically the fundamentals, right? Everything you need to know about learning about building an app for the marketplace using Atlassian Connect. So let's walk through the agenda for today. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the Atlassian ecosystem, what it looks like, and look at some numbers there. Then we're going to dive into building a cloud app. What does it take to build a cloud app? So we'll look at that at a high level. We'll look at what you need to get started and how to get that. Next, we'll look at the structure of a cloud app. This is where we're going to start looking at some code and seeing how to start building your app. We'll look at some security things to keep in mind. And we'll just touch at that at the high level. There's some talks later on today that'll deeper dive into that. And then we'll look into some additional resources and take the information that you learned today and then go continue on your development journey so that you can start building. So think of today as this talk is just sort of like a high level to get you familiar with the key pieces that you need. So let's first dive into the Atlassian ecosystem and explore the opportunities available to you. As a developer, you have access to various ways to integrate with Atlassian products, and we'll learn a couple of them today here at Developer Day. Before we start, I want to introduce you to the Atlassian Marketplace. A big part of why our Atlassian ecosystem is successful is because of the Atlassian Marketplace. The Marketplace plays a vital role in delighting our customers. The vibrant economy around Atlassian provides a huge opportunity for developers and vendors, large and small. And it's developers like you that is integral to the growth of the Atlassian Marketplace. So let's take a look at some stats. Our ecosystem has over 1,000 third-party vendors and developers with at least one public app in the marketplace. And this includes developers at small vendors, as well as some of the most prominent companies in technology. Within the marketplace, users can find more than 4,000 free and paid apps that satisfy custom use cases for our products, as well as integrations with non-Atlassian products. The values customers find in these apps is reflected in the growth of the marketplace. Cumulatively, Atlassian Marketplace has surpassed $500 million in purchases since its inception in 2012. That's huge. And in fiscal year 2018 alone, the marketplace generated more than $200 million in purchases. The last year has really shown the growth of the marketplace. Now you might be wondering, what kind of app can I build with a thriving ecosystem already established? So let's take some inspiration from some of the developers who have been successful in the Atlassian Marketplace. First, we have a quote from Daniel Wester. You saw him this morning in the keynote. He says, I had written a plugin that integrates Chef with Atlassian Bamboo and realized that I could make a business out of developing apps. You're going to see a theme here. Build something that you use and then use that app out in the marketplace. Now Daniel, he's fairly well known in the ecosystem, and just last year at Partner Day at Summit 2018, we awarded him the Lifetime Achievement Award for all of his success in the marketplace, as well as his contributions to the developer community. So if you go to our developer community forum, you'll likely run into Daniel helping you out. Another quote from a bigger vendor, Jamie Eklund, who wrote Scriptrunner. If you've written something useful to you, which is how most apps, you're going to be useful for other people. So again, that same theme of build something for yourself and then share it with others. Now, Scriptrunner, as you might know, is a very popular app in the marketplace. It's currently a staff pick and has over 21,000 installs. Now, there are three types of apps you can build for the marketplace. They coincide with the deployment options available for Atlassian products. There's Server, which is for our Atlassian on-premise products. There's Data Center, which is built similar to Server, but has an added requirement to ensure that the apps are built with clustering and performance in mind. And then there are Cloud, and these are apps that are built specifically for our cloud products. Now, and this is the focus of today's talk, and ultimately the fundamentals track here at Developer Day. So let's take a look at what it takes to build a cloud app. Now, building a cloud app is completely different than building an app for Server in Data Center. So let's take a look at the lay of the land here. So here you've got Jira or Atlassian product on one side, and you've got your app being hosted somewhere else. Now, an administrator is going to install your app in the Marketplace or in the Universal Plugin Manager. And when they hit install, what they're doing is they're going to your app, they're asking for a description of your app, which you're going to send to them, and it describes all of the places where you're going to extend. And then Jira or Confluence will pass over to you a context of the tenant information that installed your app. Now, once you have this information, there's some things that you can instantly be able to do. You can make requests of the product's REST APIs, as well as register and listen to webhooks that are coming from the product. Now, a user who's using the Atlassian product, when they're navigating around the product and you have an app installed that's maybe extended a certain area of the product, to them it looks seamless. When they request a page that has an extension in the product, both of those things are going to go to the user at the same time, and to them it'll look flawless. So let's take a look at how that's done. The first thing to know is that cloud apps are built using Atlassian Connect. This is the foundation for many cloud apps. It handles discovery, installation, authentication, and seamless integration into the product UI. An Atlassian Connect app could be an integration with an existing service, a new feature, or even a new product that runs within our product. So let's take a look at what Atlassian Connect can actually do. It can add content or features via adding pages or panels, a new report, JQuery functions, gadgets, and all of these things are done in certain defined places in the cloud UI via modules. Next thing you're able to do is you're able to make secure requests to the Atlassian Product Cloud REST APIs. And finally, your app can easily register to listen to secure webhooks from the Atlassian Cloud product. So let's take a look at what an app looks like in product. And hopefully you're using apps already and you know what this looks like. But here's a very basic Jira issue. But the thing I wanted to point out is this little Envision area here. Now, this is an iframe that Envision is extending into a Jira issue view. And so what they're doing is asking for a URL of an Envision design that can be added to this issue. And so when that issue gets added, a preview of that design is added directly into the issue. Now, this allows the user to stay right in Jira, look at the designs, and make the decision to go look at the prototype if they need to. Now, when you're building a server app, your choice of technology stack is limited to using Java, as your app is installed directly into the Atlassian product, and that's the technology stack we use in our products. That's the choice we made. And so that ultimately means that you need to use that as well. Now, in cloud, you don't have these limitations. So if you want to build a Node app, sure, fine. Do you want to use MongoDB as your persistent storage data? Yeah, that's fine too. Maybe you want to containerize your app into Docker. Yeah, and that allows you to easily move your app around to the different hosting companies. Speaking of hosting companies, maybe you want to host on AWS. Yeah, that's fine, your choice. Maybe you want to use PostgreSQL for your persistent storage data. Or you want to use Redis for caching to improve the performance of your app. Or maybe you prefer DigitalOcean. Maybe Node.js isn't your thing. Maybe you're a Microsoft team, and maybe you want to use ASP.NET, SQL Server, use Elasticsearch for some search functionality that you're using in your app. And then you can host all that on Azure. You know, the point of all of this, though, is that the choice is yours. It doesn't matter what you choose, as long as the technology stack supports being able to call HTTP requests. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what you need to use to build a cloud app. So let's get started building an app. First thing we need is something to build on. So let's get an Atlassian Developer Cloud instance and learn how to install an app. So this URL will be on the next couple of slides at the top, but this URL should be the place you go to request and sign up for an Atlassian Cloud development environment. So this is a small cloud instance that you're able to use to develop an app and host and test and do your testing. So when you go to that URL, you'll get a page that looks like this, where you'll claim your site. So you'll give it a site name, and so this is the name that will go into your URL. So if you put Ralph's Jira.Atlassian.net, that would be the site. You give it your name and your email address. If you're signed in with your Atlassian account, it'll automatically fill that in. But I want to point out this long bit of text here towards the bottom, because this is what trips up a lot of developers. So your developer instance is limited to the number of users that you're allowed to use. For Jira, Jira software, you're only allowed 5 users, and that should be more than enough for you to be able to develop locally. For Jira Service Desk, however, you're only allowed 1 user agent. And so this is usually the place where it trips up developers. If you add 2 user agents, billing usually starts kicking in, and that's usually when they ask for help. No fear, though, if you do that, just bring it back down to 1 user agent, billing will go away, go back to a free plan. And likewise, for Confluence, you're allowed 5 users. So please keep that in mind. All right, once you've gone through that form, it'll take about 3 to 5 minutes to spin up a cloud instance. It'll walk you through setting up a Jira project, which you need to finish first. And then once you finish setting up a project, what we need to do is enable development mode. And so in the main menu on the left there, you'll find Jira settings. You'll go to apps, and you go to manage apps. And down at the bottom, as you see here, there's a settings link. That setting link brings up this modal. And you need to make sure this enable development mode is checked. And this will allow you to install apps directly from a URL. Without checking this, you won't get that option. So after you close that window, behind this upload app modal window will be a link right next to build a new app that says upload an app. When you click on that, you get this modal window. And here we can add a direct link to our app descriptor, and we'll touch on that in a few minutes. Then with some help from some invaluable tools like ngrok, which allows us to run our app locally on our laptops or desktops, and we can then run ngrok next to it. This allows us to, ngrok will provide us a public URL to our app that's running locally that we can use in when we upload an app. All right, let's take a look at some of the structure of a cloud app. Now, the app descriptor is a JSON file, typically called Atlassian Connect.json, sometimes called Descriptor.json. The name of the file doesn't really matter, because you're specifying that name of the file when you upload an app. And this describes the app to the Atlassian application. Now, this descriptor includes general information for the app, as well as the modules that the app wants to use or extend. So let's take a look at the bare minimum you need. What are the required fields you need to create a descriptor file? So here, a little bit of JSON, and this is it. If we copied this, JSON file and uploaded this into a product, this would actually install, even though it doesn't do anything and doesn't describe much, but it is all of the required fields for an Atlassian Connect descriptor file. So here we have, we're setting the authentication to none. We're telling it where to go find our app. So what is the base URL of our app? And here we're using ngrok to do that. And what is the key? So the key needs to be unique to the marketplace if you're going to publish your app on the marketplace. But your key is sort of your identifier to the ecosystem of what your app's called. So let's take a look at a basic descriptor, something that actually does something. So here at the top, we've got our key again. Hopefully that's unique to the marketplace. We have our name. This is a descriptive name that will show up in our Manage Apps screen as well as UPM. We have a description, something that sort of describes what the app is doing. Again, that will show up in the Manage App screen. Vendor information, again, shows up in the Manage App screen. Again, our base URL telling us where to go find our app. Then we have some links here that describe points to where the descriptor file is, so that's self. If you have a home page that has like maybe some marketing materials, you can put that there. And again, these are things that are pulled out of a marketplace that help describe your app. Oop, one step too far. What scrolled by was the authentication. We set it to JWT, and what also scrolled by, I don't remember what else scrolled by. But here, scopes, we'll touch on this in a little bit later. This tells the Atlassian product what our app is asking of it. What can the app do? And so in this case, we're just asking the Atlassian product, our app just wants to read the data, doesn't want to do anything else. And there's things, your app can read data, it can write data, it can perform admin functions. There's a lot that your app can actually do. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. Now, modules, this is where we're going to start extending the Atlassian product. And so in this case, we're just defining a general page. And a general page is just basically a link within the product that we can do whatever we want with it. And so here we have an object that's being set up. We have a key. Now this key for the module needs to be unique to the descriptor. So if we have more than one general page, which is possible, as you can see, we have, we're using an array of objects here, so we can have multiple general pages if we wanted to. So the key needs to be unique to the descriptor. Location, where are we putting this link to this page? And here we're using system.top.navigation.bar, which will ironically show up on the left side menu, the main menu of the product. Why system.top? Well, we recently went through a redesign and we're leaving this backwards compatible. Name, this is the name of your link activity. And again, we're extending using iframe. So where is this content, where is this HTML coming from? And so that's what that URL is. This URL is going to pull in the content from that URL and show it into the iframe. In conditions, how are we displaying this to people? If we left this off, it would just show up to everybody. But because we have a condition here, we're only showing this link to users that are logged in. And then finally, we have this new property called API migrations. Again, we've been talking about privacy and user controls all day. And so we are actually in the middle of doing an API migration from having username and user key to scrubbing that out to just having Atlassian ID. And so as you're going through that migration, you can set this flag GDPR true, which says, hey, I'm ready, I want to use the new APIs. And so while you're testing, you want to set that to true, but when you publish your app, you want to make sure that's set to true so that your app gets the new APIs as well. So what does this all look like? So it's very simple, right? So in Jira here, we have our main navigation. We've added this new link called activity. And on the right side here is the custom HTML that we're pulling into an iframe. And so within that page, we're doing some REST API calls to get all of the project information, and then we're using Atlas Kit, which I'll talk about in a little bit later, to do some displaying so that it looks sort of similar to the Atlassian product. That was the piece that flew by that I said I forgot what it was. The lifecycle, so the part that flew by that I missed, this is what it looked like. So you have the authentication type of JWT. So the lifecycle allows an app to register callbacks for events that occur in the lifecycle of an installation. When a lifecycle event is fired, a post request will be made to the appropriate URL registered for the event. So the installed lifecycle callback is an integral part of the installation process of an app, whereas the remaining lifecycle events are essentially webhooks. So each property in this object is a URL relative to the app space URL. So when an app is installed, a webhook is fired to the registered URL in the app descriptor. So when the product fires the webhook, it will send the HTTP request payload to your app. So you can define this URL to go to wherever you want. But basically, when an admin clicks on the install button, this is the URL that's going to get fired. And so what happens when that gets fired? Well, this HTTP payload, request payload, will be sent to you. So lifecycle callbacks contain this JSON data payload with important tenant information that you will need to store in your app in order to sign and verify future requests. Now, the best practice is to save this object into your persistent data store and be able to retrieve it using the client key. Now, the client key is the unique identifier for the instance that the app is currently installed. Now, as your app can be installed into multiple tenants, it's important that you keep your data separate and that you can use the client key to help you out. So again, the most important attributes in this object are the client key and the shared secret. Those will be important in securing your requests to and from the Atlassian product. Let's take a look at some backend code. So here in your backend code, you'd set up a route that listens for a post on the URL that you defined in your descriptor. So in this Node.js example, we'd look for the payload in the request.body property, and then we can do whatever we want with it. For instance, let's save it to a persistence database so we can retrieve it later. All right, there are two types of modules. There are basic iframes that allow you to display content in different locations in the Atlassian products, and more advanced modules that let you provide advanced specific functionality. Let's take a look at some examples. So location-based examples, issue view, extending the issue view like we saw in the original example. Extending out the project sidebar, extending out Jira admin, the user profile menu, Jira home container, project settings in Jira, Jira software boards. And Confluence, perhaps extending out the content byline, or admin and general pages. Now, advanced modules will allow you to be able to add new issue tab panels or dashboard items, project admin tab panels, add additional reports, different search request views, add specific workflow post functions, and then in Confluence, perhaps create new blueprint templates or create an entirely different Confluence theme. Again, just to look at what the module definition looks like in the Atlassian Connect descriptor. Again, there will be a modules object, and within there is where we define all of our modules. And here we have general pages. Again, we can have multiple general pages. That's why we have an array there. And then we can also have multiple modules. So not just multiple general pages, but we can define multiple modules within our descriptor. So here we have we're defining a web section. It's going into the location of admin plugins menu. It has a value of example app name, so that's the name of the section. And then within there, we're also defining a module called web items. And its location is also the admin plugins menu, but it's the example menu section, which is the key name of our web section. And so this web item is actually going into the web section that we defined earlier. And so when they click on this web item, it will go to that URL example section link. So just an example of how these modules could potentially work together, and how you need to add them into your descriptor. Now you might be thinking to yourself, okay, we're using iframes, but how do we handle the same origin policy? How do we get around that? Because there are some inherent security concerns or security blockers within the browser that will make it difficult for our iframe to be loaded in from a different domain from the parent domain that an Atlassian app is. And great, that's a great question to be asking yourself. And that's where the Atlassian Connect JavaScript library is here to help. So in every iframe that you create, you're going to want to add this all.js from the host product. Now you don't want to download the all.js to your app. You want to be able to host it right from the host product. And that URL will get you there. Again, you can go to the documentation and find that. Now, this library establishes the cross-domain bridge with its parent. It also provides several methods and objects that you can use in your pages without making a trip back to your app server. Now, what happens if you run into a problem while you're developing and you think you might have found the Atlassian Connect JavaScript file? Well, you can use our debug version. So all you need to do is put -debug into all.js, and you'll get a unminimized, uncompressed version of our library. All.js is a minimized and compressed version for speed and performance. There are some options. The JavaScript library has some configuration options for customizing its behavior. The options are passed using the data options attribute. So you can resize your app. So you can deactivate the automatic resizing by setting resize equal to false. With size to parent true, the iframe will take up its parent space. So if you have like a small amount of content in your iframe, so just say a title, but your iframe container in the app is this big, if you don't have that set to true, it'll only be this size, and then you have your background color is there, and then everything else goes gray. So it looks kind of crappy without it. There are also options to set a margin for your iframe content, and to set the base tag to your host URL in case you want to link to somewhere else in the product from your app's iframe. Now, the Atlassian Connect JavaScript library comes with a number of helpful methods to do things like open dialogues, set cookies, interact with the product, and various other methods. Now, in this example, we're showing the request method, which will allow you to make requests to the product REST API right in the client of your app. So the key thing here is to point out is ap.request. AP is the object that holds the Atlassian Connect methods, and then request will do the request to the product in a secure fashion. Let's talk about security. We're just going to talk about it at a high level. Now, there's authentication, and then there's authorization. Let's look at authentication quickly. Atlassian Connect apps use JWT, or JSON Web Tokens, for authentication. Now, this is already built into the supported Atlassian Connect libraries. Now, when an app is installed, a security context is exchanged with the application. Now, this happens in the Lifecycle events that we covered earlier. Now, this context is used to create the valid JWT tokens that are embedded in API calls. Now, these JWT tokens, we'll go into depth in those in the next talk that Leo is going to talk about next. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. Now, the use of JWT tokens guarantees that Jira Cloud can verify, or Confluence Cloud can verify it is talking to the app, and vice versa. So it's authenticating that the request is valid. It also verifies that none of the query parameters of the HTTP request nor the path or the HTTP method were altered in transit. And there's a very special and custom field that we put into JWT tokens that makes sure that a man-in-the-middle attack doesn't happen. Again, Leo's talk coming up right after this will dive deeper into JWT tokens, how to create them, how to decode them, and how to use them in requests. Now, authorization tells your app tells the product what your app is asking of it. So there are scopes, and we saw that in our descriptor earlier, and we'll see an example of that coming up. But scopes are defined in the app descriptor and statically specify the maximum set of actions that an app may perform. So read, write, admin, things like that. This security level is enforced by Atlassian Connect and cannot be bypassed by app implementations. Additionally, every app is assigned its own app user in the cloud instance. So in general, server-to-server requests are made by an app user, and in some situations, the configuration of permission or issue security schemes in Jira Cloud or Confluence Cloud by an administrator could cause an app user not to have the proper permissions to make a request. Now, this isn't something that you normally can have control over, but it's something to be aware of in case you get a support request from a user of your app that says things aren't working, you don't know why. Perhaps ask them, did your admin make any changes to the permissions there? So scopes you can define, and permissions and schemes you don't have control over. Again, let's take a look at an app descriptor and see where those scopes show up there. So here we're defining scopes, and we're defining our app to have both read and write permissions. So how do you find what scopes that you need for your app? So again, we can go back to our developer.atlassian.com documentation, and here we're looking up an endpoint in Confluence for space. So it returns all of the spaces. Now the key thing to look here is right in the documentation it says app scope required read. So the reference documentation will tell you which scopes are needed for the resources that you want to use. So you need to keep those in mind. All right, let's take a look at some additional resources. You've got the basics, you've got the foundations of building an app. How do you take that further? I've given you sort of a very high level look at how to build an app. But how do you really actually turn that into something? First, let's talk about the supported frameworks that we provide to you. So there are two frameworks that you can download. Think of them as bootstrap projects, right? Atlassian Connect Express is a Node.js Express app that has all of the plumbing already into the framework. So it will handle JWT tokens, it will handle the lifecycle for you, it will handle making requests for you in a secure fashion. Additionally, Atlassian Connect Spring Boot. So are you using Java Spring Boot? So you have two options here that are supported from the Atlassian developers in being able to start up an app quickly. Now, if you're just learning how to build an app, I highly suggest trying to go through building the lifecycle routes yourself, understanding everything that comes to you, making a request using JWT, creating that JWT token, just in a test app. Understand how that works first before you go into these frameworks, because it abstracts a lot of that away from you, and if you don't understand what's happening, you won't even know that it's happening. Again, there are some Go URL links here, go.atlassian.com/AC-Express for the Atlassian Connect Express app, and go.atlassian.com/AC Spring Boot for the Spring Boot framework. I talked a little bit about AtlasKit earlier. Now, AtlasKit is a front-end component library written in React that follows Atlassian design guidelines. It makes it easy for your app to look like it belongs in the product. So it provides front-end components like dialogues, alerts, things that you might use in the UI of your app. It also provides some CSS style sheets that you can also utilize, so you don't have to design from scratch. You can learn more about AtlasKit at atlaskit.atlassian.com. how do you take what I've told you today and try to learn from that? Well, there's a couple of tutorials that you can walk through. And these have been recently updated. Like we talked about in the keynote this morning, we're trying to make our documentation better. And so these are older tutorials that we've recently updated to make sure that they work for you. So Jira Activity is the tutorial that does exactly that example we showed earlier with the descriptor. So that will put activity in that sidebar and show all of the projects by requesting them. So this will walk you through, build a basic app with a general page and use Atlassian Connect Express to do that. Confluence Cloud has multiple tutorials, and we've recently went through and updated all of them. And so there are multiple tutorials on how to create macros and how to extend things there. So I highly suggest looking at those. Now, how do you find these tutorials? So you can go to the Jira Cloud Platform documentation in developer.atlassian.com, go to guides, and look for tutorial and guides. Similarly for Confluence Cloud, just navigate to the Confluence Cloud documentation, go to guides, go to tutorial and guides, and you'll see the list of all of the tutorials that are available there. Next, I want to walk you through the rest of the day. We've designed this track today to sort of flow from this point on. So understanding JWT authentication for Atlassian Connect will be coming up at 1:50, and it will deeper dive into hopefully you understanding what JWT tokens are, why we use them, how we encrypt them, and how to make sure that a man-in-the-middle attack doesn't happen, and how you can make secure requests, as well as verifying those requests from the Atlassian product. Next, at 2:20, we'll go into how to build an app using an app integration using the new OAuth 2 that we talked about at the keynote. Then we'll break, and then we'll come back for Edit Your Way, Customizing Confluence Cloud Editor. So from this point on and the rest of the day, we're going to be looking into specific modules and how to build an extension using those modules. And so first up, we're going to be extending Confluence Cloud and building a Confluence macro. Next, at 4:20, we're going to hear from a marketplace vendor. So all through today, you've been hearing from Atlassians, but at 4:20, we're going to actually ask a marketplace vendor to come up here and talk about Castle in the Clouds, best practices for building hosted Atlassian apps. So they're going to try to talk about the things that they've learned and things to stay away from as they've built their apps and published in the marketplace. So it'd be invaluable to listen to. Ideally, that would have been at the end of the day, but our last lightning talk was second from last. And then at the end, Taylor is going to come in and talk about the new issue view. So we recently designed a new issue view in Jira and talk about all of the new extension points and how things moved around and how best to extend the Jira issue view in Jira Cloud. All right. That's it. That's all I have for you today. I don't think there's any time for questions. Peter?
I'm afraid not. Whoa, it works. So thank you very much, Ralph. And I hope to see you all here back again in 10 minutes. Thank you.